Hello everyone, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Hans Ulrich Obrist, I'm the Artistic Director of the Serpentine Galleries in London, and I'm here with Cao Fei. So delighted that we can have this conversation here today. Before starting, I want to thank Mark Spiegler and the Art Basel Dream Team. It's my great pleasure to be with you today and to stage this very special conversation with Art Basel and Cao Fei. It's the latest in many talks I'm doing with Art Basel and the Conversation program. I've been involved with it since the beginning in 2003 and 4, the Art Basel Salon initially, which then later developed into Conversation. And we of course have the recurring ongoing panel, the Artist Influencer series, where we have stage discussions with artists such as Precious Okoyomon, Katharina Gross, or also Arthur Jafa. However, today is actually my first online talk with Art Basel, and I'm delighted to be joined today from Beijing by the amazing Cao Fei. And it is, of course, not the first time we meet with Cao Fei. We met almost 20 years ago, thanks to Huhan Ru in Guangzhou. And we did actually a previous conversation for Art Basel, which you can all see online. For those of you who want to see a previous conversation, that was the premiere artist talk during the Art Basel Hong Kong in 2015, where Cao Fei talked about the specific commission, a very urban commission in Hong Kong. At this time, it was actually the work Same Old Brand New. It was a landmark video installation, and it was shown across the entire facade of the International Commerce Center, the tallest building in the city. This year is a very special year for our collaboration, Cao Fei, because we've worked together with curator Joseph Constable on the Blueprint exhibition at the Serpentine Galleries in London, which initially opened in March and then had to be closed for the lockdown and could reopen in September. And that was actually your so far largest institutional solo show in the UK. So we're going to discuss this, but we're going to discuss foremost and above all a world premiere, something you've never spoken about before, a forthcoming new project for Shanghai. It's titled Isle of Instability, commissioned by Audemars Piguet, and has a lot to do actually what happened over the last couple of months. Cao Fei, of course, needs no introduction. Born in Guangzhou, Cao Fei is one of the most innovative artists to have emerged in this century, in the 21st century. Currently living in Beijing, Cao Fei's practice bridges film, digital media, photography, sculpture, installation, and performance, all of which actually capture her fascination with human responses to the rapid technological development. And this idea of bringing all the disciplines together made me actually think, I was just looking at this book, The World of Diaghilev, made me actually think of Diaghilev, right? The idea of bringing all the disciplines together, all these different works together. And we're going to talk about that as well. But I wanted to begin, Cao Fei, actually with the last couple of months, because this is a very special moment to talk to you, because you have just returned to Beijing after residing in Singapore for nearly 9 months over the lockdown with your family. And I'd like to begin by asking you about your experience of the lockdown and how it actually feels to be back home.
As you know, we have a lot of conversation during the lockdown when I'm in Singapore, right? And I try very hard to come over to the opening of Serpentine Blueprint show. Almost cannot come over for the opening in March, but thank you for Hans Ulrich. Try very hard to took me from Singapore to the Serpentine opening, and that's totally 10 months. Just arrived to Beijing for a week, so it's quite strange for me to coming back my home. Like what my kids say is our home is like a new home to them, because it's too strange. We have 10 months lockdown in Singapore.
And of course, your experience of actually being in Singapore is fundamental as the starting point for the work we're going to discuss now, the work for Audemars Piguet, The Isle of Instability. It's a work which will premiere in November at the West Point Art and Design. And initially you had another project for Audemars Piguet, which actually had then to be put on hold because of the lockdown. And it's very interesting because you then actually develop this new work very much, as Denis Pernet, the curator of Audemars, says, by not being able to access your studio in Beijing, by creating actually from your apartment in Singapore an installation really from home in the company of your family. So the subject matter became in a way the situation itself. Can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of this piece?
So the beginning, Audemars Piguet invites me to going to Swiss to their headquarters to visit their factory, because as you know, I'm very interested all the factory in the world, especially in China. I want to observe how those watches come out from the factory in Swiss mountain. And then I spend 2-3 days in the mountain. I just think about how I can do in the factory to observe the worker, the immigrant worker, to produce the watch there. But since the virus happened, we can't realize this project. And then I asked them, we have two options. We postpone the whole project to next year, or we can do something about my instability life in Singapore. So I'm very happy. They are very brave and take the second option to support me to realize this project during the lockdown.
And of course, your connection really to Singapore changed a lot, because at the beginning, when you were there, you were a visitor, and then you became more and more local. I found this quote, I'm going to quote you here. Being away from home for so long, the foreign culture became familiar. The cuisine became my go-to delicacy. The labyrinth of Alice became my daily routine. The strangers next door became my friendly neighbors. And I, once a guest of this country, became a resident. Lost in transition, certainty has become a luxury. End of quote. Could you talk a little bit more? Because it's fascinating, this gradual change, no, of all of a sudden being familiar with the situation and kind of coming up with these daily rituals and routines you started to develop in Singapore.
My husband is Singaporean, so we have apartment in Singapore. So then I think the apartment is safest for such a long time there. But I never left China such long time. Normally, I only travel like 10 days or 2 weeks out of China. So Singapore is not a strange country for me, but I think they have a huge Chinese community there. That has made me more comfortable. I can speak Chinese sometimes. I can eat the Chinese food. And also because I don't know when I can going back to home. So I'm planning maybe the next 1 year or 2 year, maybe the kid have to study at the local school in the future, because nobody know. So I try to adapt the daily life there. I try to be the kind of citizen, adapt the community. So that's why I have like a daily, like a walking through the community, and try to cook the local food. Sometimes I use my camera. I think that is the channel or the medium to have dialogue with the city, with the people, to observe the city, because we have so many conversation talk. We speak about South Asia and talk about the Singapore city as an artificial tourism country. But you never know when you, as a citizen, not a tourist, but you live there, you can really taste the daily texture. I can see people, I can feel the same condition when I'm in Beijing. I think this gives me a lot of inspiration. Even I talked to Eugene Tan, the director of National Gallery. Probably future, I have another film about Singapore from my observation. I think develop another window for me, not only focus the scenes of China.
And you did many things. You did yoga, you told me sports, painting, handicrafts, writing, reading, breathing, staying calm, staying concentrated. Now, obviously it has to do with constraints, and the work you're going to develop now out of this experience has to do with strong constraints. There was a whole literary group in France, actually around Georges Perec, who developed poetry out of constraints, literature out of constraints. So Georges Perec, for example, wrote an entire novel without the letter E. He would never use the letter E. And you developed within these spatial constraints, really, of the apartment, within these limitations of the domestic space, an amazing work. It has a lot to do with the collaboration with your daughter, who is also the actress in the piece, and it's about a fiction of her being the last human. Can you tell us a little bit about what you did in the apartment and how this island suddenly appeared?
Yeah, so during the lockdown, I will think about how could I do with this project. So, and during the lockdown, you cannot film outside. You cannot have a filming. So only thing I can do is at home. So I just speak with my daughter. Should we do something at home? Some performance, some theater, some small home show. So she's very happy about that because she's very interested in performing. And then we just start to doing some small thing. Sometimes we go out, the supermarket, the place only open to buy some product. And then we use the living room as a filming studio.
It's also fascinating that there is a connection to your very early work, because I will never forget we worked with Hu Hanru on our exhibition Cities on the Move, which was our exhibition Asian cities. We toured from 96, 97 to 2001, 2002. And Hu Hanru called me, it was sometimes in the early 2000s, from Guangzhou, and he said that he had met you, I think, at the art school and had seen these extraordinary early sort of performance works. And in a way, looking at this work you did during the lockdown, it sort of makes me think of your very early, very low-tech videos, such as Imbalance 257 or Hip Hop Guangzhou. Can you talk a little bit about those very early works and how it connects?
Yeah, I think so. During the lockdown, only filming medium is my cell phone, my iPhone 10, because I didn't bring any equipment with me for the short trip in Singapore. So that's only medium, and even I don't have the tripod. And then I use the rubbish, the bin as a tripod to film my daughter. I'm very happy to use this kind of a simple medium, and especially I just finished the Nova big film with a big crew in 2 hour film, professional film. So that is a big contract. But when you're doing this limitation, immediately it remind me the early production. No budget, no support. We only have like a DV machine. We have a classmate. We don't have lighting. So it's like a back to the early stage. But when you have a less support, less technique, the thing is only you and your daughter. We make me more, more back to nature. Because when you filming in a big group, a lot of people around you, we have a time limit, we have a huge budget limit, so you have to face many issues. But filming this piece, we spent like 2 months. We sometimes have sunshine. We were filming at home, and sometimes we are tired. We don't want to film, and sometimes we want to restart again. It's very free, and I think it's very positive for the creation.
Thank you. Now, another thing which happened during the lockdown was actually quite at the beginning of the lockdown in China. It got a lot of alerts on social media that the Do It project had been reactivated, and many people had started to redo Do It, because Do It is a very old project we started in the 90s, 93, with Christian Boltanski and Bertrand Lavier, and I've curated ever since. It's an exhibition entirely constituted by instructions and recipes and how-to manuals, and people all over the world can interpret those, and it's a learning system. Wherever the show goes, it's been to 165 cities so far. It learns and from the local context. And of course, we've done Do It many times in China, and you've contributed early on to the Do It project, but you've then, during the lockdown, done an amazing new Do It piece with these eyes. Can you tell us about it? Because it connects to this idea of the domestic space.
When we talk about the limitation, because the lockdown is offer us this limitation condition. So you will looking things very intimate, like you will observe things around you, like a floor, like a window, or tiny things, detail. Um, so that's why I back to the low tech, back to the no medium, back to paper, back to sculpture, back to handmade. So also it's like do it project. Why is people will using it again, will mention or redo it again? I think it's this kind of pandemic condition is force us to use limited tools again.
And of course, just before the lockdown, opened your exhibition in London at the Serpentine. The exhibition Blueprints, it was only open for a few days in March and then could reopen actually for 6 weeks in August and September, co-curated with Joseph Constable. And I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about this project, because it's really the project you've been working on for the last couple of years. I visited your studio, and it's in a way, it reminded me actually when I came for the first time to your new studio of what the Bechers had done in the 60s and 70s, Bernd and Hilla Becher, when they started to document the industrial architecture in Germany, which was about to disappear. You started to document an amazing memory, really, of the arrival of the internet in China. And this neighborhood of actually your studio is so important for technology. Can you tell us a little bit about this whole research you've been doing in this studio in the Hongxia Theater in Beijing, and how it then led to the film, to Nova, and also to the exhibition Blueprint at the Serpentine?
So the Hongxia Theater, you visit the old cinema since 2015, and until now, almost 5 year. So when I finish this project, I think is the Hongxia publication is totally is conclusion of this project. Hongxia cinema is a very special cinema in China. Not famous, but for me, it's a huge meaning behind that. It's a technology factory who built the first computer in China. So this is a factory built cinema for the employee use it. And when I ran this cinema, I digging the history and found very interesting Chinese technology storyline behind that. So I use this as an engine to develop the almost 60 years Chinese technology since the new China beginning. I do a lot of things about that. For example, in the Blueprint show, we have the engine of rebuild this Hongxia cinema reception. And also we have like a virtual VR kitchen. Look at this image is the recession in the Serpentine show. So I think for me, important thing is like virtual reality, how to connect this old technology, who represent this technology company is a kind of old tech, met the new tech. And one level is the VR and AR as a data to document this building and document the history itself. And another level is the Nova film and the VR AR world beyond the reality, beyond the Hongxia Theater historical. So it's kind of use this project against the forgetting of this Chinese technology history. And also we want to beyond that create some sci-fi retro future memory to our generation.
And when one entered the exhibition on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, there were these two kitchens. It's actually reinstall really of your kitchen in the studio with the fridge and the sink and everything, in the kitchen. It's in these two spaces the visitors could initially experience prior to the lockdown, the VR. There is of course a limit to the VR as we discussed, because the immersiveness has maybe been exaggerated, because there is of course the headsets and there is a certain isolation from the other visitors. You then change the piece really during the lockdown into an AR piece. And so now it's a kind of a site-specific AR piece. So the visitors actually come into the space and can experience in the kitchen. And a lot of things happen. The astronaut appears from the sink. The future seems to be invented with fragments of the past. Can you tell us a little bit more what you did with VR and how you then changed it into AR?
So the VR technology we cannot use in the Serpentine exhibition because right after the rivalries reopening, so Serpentine told me cannot use the equipment again because it's a touching equipment. And then we think about use like AR, augmented reality. So the audience can use their cell phone to scan the kitchen and then appear another space, augmented reality space from their cell phone. So that's also happened during the pandemic. And then we see a lot of AR work happen in the world because the traveling limit and no show in the world at that time. Then we develop this AR piece. We can see everybody download this AR boy everywhere in the world. Then make me think about how to work out the museum space, how to make this the relation from the project, from the show to somebody at the corner of the world. They can meet this artwork from nowhere. AR from this level, I think is work because it's built up another connection with stranger, with audience on the virtual platform.
Because the AR piece could be experienced in the space, in the kitchen, but users were also able to actually place one of the central characters from your film Nova wherever they were. So it could also go from the kitchen into the world.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, and also I see a lot of people download the kit at their living room and their kitchen again. So you can see the Western kitchen met the Chinese kitchen. So it's built up another super complicated reality, not the doubling reality, but now it's much more complicated with contents from the film, from the project, and mix their personal real life.
And of course, for the whole exhibition, the research had a lot to do with you as an artist being almost like a historian. And that's why I drew the comparison, also with the Bechers. It's a history which you documented, which without you might easily have been lost because it disappears at incredible pace. But there is also in your work actually an anthropological dimension. And that brings me actually to your Instagram account, because again, during the lockdown, you documented your everyday life in isolation with your family. And you identified symbol, and it's almost like an iconography, maybe one could say, of this moment. The Dettol logo, for example. Could you talk a little bit about what you did with Instagram?
Before Instagram, I using some old medium like very early blog and MySpace. Like of course have a website, and also the Second Life as a social platform. So I think it's very nature. I use Instagram as another communicate platform for my, not only for my work, but also for my daily, like a recorded diary. So I think this, for this project also is good platform as a window to showing what happened during this pandemic, what we met, like this mushroom is from the carpet of the quarantine hotel in China. Is very strange. Just a mushroom growing from there. I think it's, for me, it's like it means something. It means we in this such condition. You can see these three images from my Instagram. It is single people, mushroom, the people with highly protection at the airport. So all these things, all I met and I saw recently. So it's both of them. The daily capture is they contract out my creation, like my film, like Haze and Folk, like Asian one. I think many of them is from this daily observation.
Now, another one could maybe almost say ritual, actually during this period of lockdown, is your practice of making drawings. And I've always admired your drawings, but you have never done them at this regularity. You've done them every now and then, but now actually during the lockdown, you did them every day. And we've never spoken about your drawings in our interviews. I wanted to ask you to show us maybe some drawings and tell us about your practice, your daily practice of drawing.
I'm not drawing every day, but I'm not painter. But normally I'm drawing some sketch, some storyboard for my filming. But I do not drawing some painting for my show, from as my artwork. But during a lockdown, I call this like a daily exercise. I take photo outside. Same. I'm not call it is painting. And also the painting, you can see is from the many of them is from the object. You can see this plastic with the medicine, and also the deck top. You see, I drawing the logo. I drawing this human is like a alien, but it's from a person as an icon on this plastic. And so that's what I say, because we have very short distance with our daily life. Uh, any object is very close to you because we know where can go. We can't see far. We only at home. Maybe the phone, Instagram as a platform, we can use it, the virtual platform. But in our real environment, the thing I can develop my imagination, maybe all this daily object, this fun object.
Now, one of the things which brings together, and that's true for your films, for your drawings, for your installation, for your writing also, because you're working on a book of your writings, I hear. For all of these activities, there is a driving force, and that's the power of the imagination. It was very central, I felt, in the Serpentine show, the Blueprint exhibition, because blueprints are provisional plans or acts of imagining other kinds of spaces that are not yet realized. So it has also to do with world building, no? Imagining worlds, building worlds. And in many of your film works, the imagination becomes a way for the characters to actually gain agency within restriction. And of course, that's exactly the situation we find ourselves now. There is alienation, there is restriction, there is loneliness. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about the power of imagination and how that can actually allow us to escape or go beyond more our current reality.
I think many of my work is deal with escape and also to looking for another utopia and how to deal with the limitation and the lost condition in the modernism. But the thing is, we cannot escape in our real life, and also we have no solution. And that's why it forced me to reconstruct the artwork. For example, the R&B City in Second Line, and the Latin word, and also the new piece, Isle of Instability. All these pieces you can see, I try to reconstruct another homeland to try to solve the problem and to adapt our reality.
And that, of course, brings us also to sci-fi. I mean, in your film Nova and in many of your works, there is a strong connection to sci-fi. Can you tell us a little bit about how you connect to sci-fi and who are the sci-fi writers who inspire you most? I mean, there is an incredible sci-fi context in China, which is of course relevant. But I was curious about your reading of sci-fi.
Actually, I'm not the sci-fi film fans, and also not the sci-fi film, sci-fi novel reader. But why the Nova film? I reference a lot of sci-fi story because I think sci-fi is strongly connected the Hongxia Theater and the technology company factory who behind the cinema. Because I think only you can use sci-fi, open this curtain, open this history curtain to take the train to meet the history. So I think the sci-fi is a kind of channel for me to discover the history and today and the future. So look at this image. That is, I collect the sci-fi story from Russia time, and it all translate in Chinese in 1960, 70, and 1980, and some of a Chinese sci-fi story. But the Chinese sci-fi story in the old time is more about technology as a tool to develop the country, but more than we just talk about the imagination. So the Soviets sci-fi in 1920, they have a huge criticize the technology will change human. They giving a lot of a question about the future and questioning the technology. Not like today, we so welcome the new era of the technology. So this is the project give me the inspiration to try to reach the sci-fi. Also, some of the sci-fi film from Andrei Tarkovsky, like Stalker, that's the film I reference to look a lot very deeply during this research process.
And the research process also, of course, addresses technology, addresses machines. I was thinking of Nam June Paik, who early on in the 60s, he built a robot, and he said that we need to kind of go beyond the kind of entertainment of these technologies and actually think what could be, how can we use those technologies maybe in a way people who invented them did not even think about. How can we actually liberate the poetic or also intercultural capacity behind such machines? And that leads us to something really fascinating. I read yesterday in an interview you gave to ArtNet. It's an interview with Noor Brara. And you discuss in this interview actually the potentially dangerous relationship that we have with machines. Quoting genetic pioneer Norbert Wiener, you say we must find a way to begin assigning code of values to our relationship with machines. Technology should be used to benefit human life, to increase our leisure time, and above all also to enrich our spiritual life. It shouldn't exist just for the sake of profit and machine worship. End of quote. Could you elaborate a little bit on how you see these human relationships to technology developing in the coming years, and also how this could potentially become something dangerous actually? Would be great to talk more about machines and your relationship to machines.
I think it's quite idealism. If you're looking back, I think for now it's idealism, idealism concept, a kind of a utopia. For sure, we imagine the future, the robot, the technology will doing our jobs, and then we have more time to read, to be with the family. So we're not under this kind of heavy working process in the factory. I think in the future is the relation with technology is not like easy to separate. We have an relaxation and we have the reading time, but I'm not criticize the robot we're taking our job, but maybe we have the third way and some new future or dangerous future we facing. That is something we don't know now, but we can see already we walking to another dangerous level in this condition.
Thank you. Now, before opening it up to the questions, we've received several questions from participants to today's talk. But before that, I have a last question, and it connects again to the future. You brought up the future. It has to do with the future, with the next generation also of artists. You have been and you are incredibly generous to younger artists in China. I went last year to see an exhibition called The New Metallurgists, which you co-curated actually with Yang Beichen. It was a group show of young Chinese artists where you basically gave visibility to a whole new generation of Chinese artists. And of course, I wanted to ask you, tell us a little bit about that, about what's happening in China in the next generation after you, about these works you showed in Düsseldorf with Yang Beichen. And then also, as a second part of the question, you know, Rainer Maria Rilke wrote this wonderful little book, which is an advice to a young poet. And I wanted to ask you what kind of would be your advice in 2020 to a young artist. So 2 questions in one.
Now I'm teaching in the CAFA, a Chinese contemporary art school in China. So I'm teaching the master degree on moving image, and also sometimes I'm doing some curating, like the show you mentioned, Düsseldorf. So because the young generation, like 10 years or 20 years younger than me, many of them they're using new technology like video, a mixed medium, performance, not too much in virtual reality. But I think this recently is not like the Hans Ulrich you met me in 2000. European American, they're hungry to understand what happened in China. So like my generation is like represent the new generation artists in the West. But now the young generation artists, most of them they study in London, in Paris, in America, and LA. If they have a less iconic in their work to represent China, but their language is more like global. What they concern is also is like a global issue that is harder for them to be a like international artist. So for the show, also I want to show the new generation what they are doing, what their work about. So I bring group of them to show in Düsseldorf. In some way, the format of the installation is you can't see the difference with the Western artists, young generation artists. And what they concern in the contents also we have like a difference, like one of the piece about the black people, many African people in China, and the video looks like in Africa, but the piece is about this African community. It's very activity in China. So it's a kind of a global issue, but it's also deal with very locally.
Thank you very much, Cao Fei. We have several questions here. Just came in here from Matthew Lopez. Question is, hello, I have a question for Cao Fei. How does one navigate into documenting the true realities in China and Singapore above the present restrictions in terms of censorship and state control especially during this global pandemic? Your thoughts?
So if you look at my work, I am not kind of like a real documenting pieces. So like Who's Utopia and also Asian one is a mix the document and drama. So it's very mix up pieces. So the new piece in Singapore, and because lockdown, we're also facing the limitation. So the new piece is about how to say, like a home performance kind of imagination level. So not facing like a real documenting, like a navigate document reality.
And we just got a question here from Sarah Paul. Sarah wants to know, was the isolation lockdown a kind of liberation for your artwork, or did you find it more difficult to find inspiration?
From the beginning, it's very hard because you are the person to experience this situation. It's hard to separate. You are an artist, you are a director, to observe out of this condition. Especially, I have two kids. We living in a small apartment. We have a difficult time, so it's a very complicated emotion about this. And also, I far from my studio and far from my assistant or equipment, anything. So I try very hard to think, to find some way to express this experience. But I believe because I have many time there, so I believe day by day and like a daily collecting my thinking. I like the exercise. I call exercise as a drawing, participating these different things. Like writing, I have ton of writing during the pandemic. So it's like a reflection in this limited space. I think it's a very good experience for me. Yeah.
And actually, the writing is something I forgot to ask you before. I'm glad you bring it up because you're working on a book of your writings. Can you tell us about that? What will the book include?
Um, yeah, next year I have a solo show in China, my first solo show in China at UCCA. So they will make you catalog a book for me to review the past 20 years creation. But also I remind me to all my writing on my blog, on my Chinese WeChat, so many medium. And also I write a lot of script before I filming. Some script I didn't film, some script I never finish, and so many writing. So I want to publish a book without any image, any photo, any video relay my piece, only writing, but the people never seen before.
My very last question, and it's the only recurrent question, as you know, in all my conversations with artists, is the question about the unrealized project. I've asked you that before because actually we know a lot about architects' unrealized projects because they publish them, but we know very little about artists' unrealized projects, which is why Alighiero Boetti many years ago encouraged me to ask artists about their unrealized projects and hopefully, facilitate and help for those to be realized. I was very curious if you could tell us a little bit about maybe one or two of your unrealized projects. And there are, of course, many categories of the unrealized. Some projects can be too big to be realized, too small to be realized. Some projects are too expensive. Some projects are simply utopic. Some are unrealizable. Some projects are sensible, but then, as Doris Lessing, the late Doris Lessing always told me, then there is also the projects one hasn't done yet because one hasn't dared to do them. That would be another category. So within all of that, I was curious to hear about one or two of your favorite unrealized projects.
So Hans and me have almost every month or week have interview online or offline for different things, different projects. So I facing this question every month. So it's really hard for me to have such many unrealized projects. So your question remind me many years ago, maybe 2006, before I have a kid, I want to film a documentary about you because I think the daily you visit running on is for me is fascinating footage to observe how a curator like you, Hans, will deal with so many tons of things, your speech, your daily life. I want to make a documentary about that very closely to follow you. So, but this is a big unrealized project because I want to document for the future audience, people, art fans, your follower, to see a real Hans Ulrich.
Cao Fei, thank you so much for this amazing conversation, and many thanks for everyone for joining us today, and also thanks to all of you who submitted questions for your great question. For those of you who want to revisit this talk, it'll soon be online as part of the Art Basel YouTube channel. A big thanks again to Cao Fei, and see you all very soon. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.